232. Let's see if I can say this whole title today.
Wow.
We're going to be talking about the Sitzer.
Nope.
Sitzer Flat Fee Revolution, the fall homebuyer surge, and Harris's tax and housing shakeup.
It's a shakeup.
Yeah, I heard
We'll
it's
find out.
really shaking up.
Good job.
Go. Get it. All right, episode 232. We're going to be talking about all those things there in the title.
All those things there in the title.
All those things.
Pull up our talking points again in a different. Oh,
Yes,
you already did that.
The
Right? You got
Sitzer
tabs
Flat Fee
and everything.
Revolution.
Welcome to long sleeve shirt weather,
It's great.
boys.
Yeah.
I don't know
Today
if
is
we're
a
there yet.
high of
Yeah.
82. It was great. Nice and rainy.
I do tend to push it a little bit, Jesse.
Yeah,
You're right.
you do.
I come out a couple weeks before it's necessary. I
I've
have
got
way
another
better
month.
winter clothes than I have summer clothes, so I can't wait to show them.
Nick and I can go a little bit longer because all this body hair.
Yes.
Same.
Exactly. But look, before we get started, thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time listening, go leave us a 5-star review because you'll probably be back because this is a great show.
It is.
Today's show is sponsored by Mortgage Mike, the Mortgage Mike. If you're looking to get a home loan here in Texas or in Oklahoma, you need to talk to Mortgage Mike. All you need to do is go to mmgloans.com. He's given that Mortgage Mike stamp of approval, throwing money at buyers left and right. So mmgloans.com. That's right. They're all clapping for him.
Sounders.
Yes,
baby.
right. And then you need a home warranty, and you need to get that from Theron Smith over at armadillo.1/Tor, TORE. He's giving you that hard shell protection on all the houses as long as they're warranting it. So, so stupid. So ridiculous.
You know, it's not ridiculous. Homeward Property Management. Check out homewarddfw.com, the home of Dana Wynn and her team over there who are just doing a fantastic job. I heard they signed a big client today, and we're very excited to
Moving into the homeowners association management space.
I know.
HOA management condo. I met with her and the ownership board there, and let's just say that space probably needs that needs to be modernized.
Is that a blue ocean?
I believe so.
Homewardhoa.com.
Homewardfw.com for all your Dallas-Fort Worth property management needs. And then look, the site's never up, tourstudios.com. But if you're looking to have an amazing podcast just like this or any type of video work, get with Jesse. You just contact him through.
Just call his phone.
I don't even know.
We'll get it up. Tour
Yeah.
Studios is like a digital speakeasy. You
Yeah.
just got to
Yes.
know where to find
Gotta
it.
know. Just gotta know.
Tourstudios.com just never shows up.
And
but-
people do, because I'm just sitting there just scrolling through my Facebook feed, and all of a sudden there's the background I know so well.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
I know.
people find us.
Chauncey Pham says she's starting a show in here. And then
Yeah.
I've seen Tamara with lawyers. So
Chauncey's just killing it with her TikTok lately, dude. I watch her stuff, and
She's
I'm like,
pretty
I'm
awesome.
so uncreative compared to you.
here's what,
Good
you know
job.
what? I've been so out of the social media space. Like I don't really open TikTok anymore.
Yeah.
Like Instagram, I'm kind of posting here and there, but it's
I told you guys about Freedom Phone, right?
Yeah.
This phone has nothing on it,
So,
and it hasn't for a couple of weeks.
I
now.
did
It's
something
amazing.
similar. So I deleted Instagram because I never really looked at Instagram anyway. But I didn't want to remove my Facebook app because we got to jump in on Homeward referrals and stuff.
Mhm.
Guilty.
Very
And
much
so I kept it, but I moved it all the way to my last screen. So I have to consciously think about scrolling all the way over for all my apps
I'd
to
already
find.
blown way past that mental hurdle,
Bro, it's been about 3 weeks now,
Yeah.
and I have not doom scrolled once. I think it takes me just long enough to realize, Brian, you don't want to do this.
Yeah.
The thing I need to do for Homeward is I just need to I literally just downloaded it for the show to share it out. I
Yeah.
will delete it off after the show.
That's fair.
And I think that's the way I need to handle it.
It
for a little
takes
bit.
2 seconds to download it.
I
so.
feel the same way I felt when I left the Facebook groups, though, man. Like there is all of a sudden I was telling Jesse at lunch today, I don't think I had ADHD. I think I had an addiction to social media.
That's what
It is shocking
Yes.
how much I remember to send an email, to text a person, to do whatever. when I don't sit down and then immediately pick up my phone to escape what, especially somebody like me,
Yeah.
who I have an avoidant nature anyways. I'm trying to hide from every problem I got. So like social media just lets you dive deep into that habit. And so not having it on my phone has been great.
I do definitely feel like there's nothing missing that I used to get out of it. I did enjoy watching a lot of skateboarding videos. I don't know why my feed had so many of them. It was certainly fun, but I don't think I felt fulfilled. I don't miss them now that they're gone.
I mean, Jesse probably knows because he'll send us Instagram video stuff, and I respond probably a week later, or just hit
that
the
actually
emoji on
works
it.
out perfectly because I do get my fill of funny videos. They're just curated by the people in my group thread.
Yes.
that are
That's
here. You
perfect.
guys do the searching for me, and you send me the funny stuff.
Well, and that's why I have no idea what's like everybody's even saying about this Sitzer stuff and all these other things. I've left all these groups. I had to go, like, I found out about this last week, I think, when it came out right after the show. But I was like, dude, this is freaking bananas. And I bet people in lab coats are going nuts.
But
And that's a good segue.
Yeah, that's a great segue because I mean, I haven't paid attention either. I mean, post August 17th, we had this buildup, right? All we talked about, and you can go listen back to the shows. In fact, we even kind of stopped doing the show for a little bit because it seemed like every week is like, all right, another NAR lawsuit, commission talking.
Just played a bunch of reruns.
Only so much crap we can talk about this.
Yep.
And before we dive into it though, because this is the commission lawsuit plaintiff Sitzer launches flat fee real estate startup.
Will you do me a favor as
Hilarious.
he's reading this? Just I think this will be helpful in the Macful. Will you pull up the website of the company? I just want to see what their website looks
But
like.
I do want to. Kelderman brought up a good point. He
He
went back.
almost typed of the company.
Kelderman likes to go back and listen to our shows.
Yeah.
I'm one that, just like movies, I can't go back and rewatch movies. I don't go back and listen to the shows. And so, but you made a good point before we went live today, is that, we have kind of predicted a lot of the stuff that has started to come true.
Yeah.
Not to toot our own horn,
but
toot, toot. Yeah. Where's the horn? Where's the horn drop here?
Sounder, Jesse, it's yellow. It's a yellow one.
That's the only one I got.
But if you go back and listen, I think you even said in 2019, when everyone was talking about a crash, we were talking about more stagflation going in the market, and just the music, the fumes running out, and just we weren't going to have this massive.
As we started rolling into the higher interest rates in May and June of 22, Brian specifically is starting to talk a ton about the worst case scenario is this market where it just doesn't make any sense for anybody to move, right? Where interest rates are too high, too many people are sitting on good interest rates. Prices have now gotten to a point where they're not super comfortable, and rents aren't chasing them down, which they're not right now. Rents are increasing, and I think 10 years from now, you're going to be bummed you didn't buy if you keep renting. But all of those things, like, that's the type of stuff we were talking about in late 21 and early 22.
And by the way, all that gets attributed to is just like a small ability to step back and look at things with a little bit of common sense and emotional maturity, and not get swept up in the apocalypse du jour. We always want to talk about crash and all that type of stuff. It's less sexy, and it's more boring to talk about things just stopping and slowing down, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Now that we're where we are and have been for the last 18 months, if you look back at what we were saying, it's not like we were some incredibly gifted intellectuals. It was just looking at the market for what it was.
Well, and we were all actively in the market. And I think that was one of the things when we brought up this topic today about this Landian deal that Sitzer started, which is it's another flat fee style brokerage.
Yeah.
But this was another thing we talked about. This flat fee aspect was so focused on the seller side. And this Landian website, where it is different, and we were curious how people were going to do this, was how do you flat fee the buy side? And that's kind of what this dude's presented through just the clarity he got during the court case.
So this is a great sarcastic segue. I like this. The one thing that I want to know about Sitzer, right? What is his? What I love about the show is we don't do any prep. We learn on the fly. What is his background?
Jesse and I do.
Is he a real estate guy?
No, he's not. So here's the story, right?
So this business model came directly from the lawsuit in his ayahuasca revelation that he had from this suit that now he started this
he was
company.
just sitting there in the court case so concerned about all his friends, the sellers, that he just couldn't believe that this was how this went down. So he just all of a sudden just had an out-of-body experience and started landing.
Exactly. I didn't. Is that a real thing? Okay. Is that a joke?
It's all the states, territories, districts, and provinces of the United States and Canada. All
Okay.
69 of them.
All right.
That's
I
where
don't
they
know
operate.
if that's a you know how in Disney movies it's like there's hidden innuendos.
Yeah.
No, I
Is
think
that-
if we add them up, I don't know how many are up there.
Yeah, I don't know, but let's break it down just to get everyone on track, right? So Sitzer is the one who brought the lawsuit, and he was frustrated because he had to pay. He felt that he was having to pay the 3% commission to a buyer's agent on the sale of his Kansas City home in 2017. That's what prompted that lawsuit. All right, we got that part done. After 4 years of litigation and the jury verdict that they found the industry liable for colluding to artificially inflate agent commissions, NAR and the 4 corporate brokerage defendants have all settled the lawsuit, and several copycats. And, Sitzer told TechCrunch in an interview, he said, I wouldn't say I had expectations in the beginning, as it was a multi-year battle of ups and downs, but I had enough confidence in my position to commit to taking action. So to launch this startup.
I don't think it's a bad idea. Again, the flat fee buy side was inevitable when the market shifted, right? The flat fee model only works to the person who feels like they're overpaying, right? So
Sure.
we had flat fee models for sellers up until recently. We've talked about it on this show. Regardless of our months of inventory, we feel very much like our market and many others are in a buyer's market. And this makes sense. And if it was going on for 4 years, I'm sure he came up with this idea during. I do think it's interesting that it's him as the lead plaintiff who's come up with it, but it was probably time for some sort of buyer flat fee model to enter the industry.
So let's talk about, just to get the listeners up to speed. Let's look at the model. Like what are they advertising?
Well, let's read what it is.
Okay.
So Landian operates as a technology platform providing AI-driven services to facilitate real estate transactions. Right. Distinction. Yeah, it's a Wednesday for me. Means that while we assist in the process of buying or selling real estate, we do not represent clients as a broker or agent would.
Yeah.
So there's no representation.
No, which that part's interesting because keep going. But part of the thing that I've noticed about this is they are removing their fiduciary responsibility from the transaction.
I think
So
that's
you're paying
key to their
less.
model.
You're paying less, but you're losing the hardest part, by the
Yes.
way. Any idiot can open a door.
Yeah. Our services are designed to complement your transaction efforts, offering a streamlined, efficient alternative to traditional brokerage services without providing legal or financial advice.
Oh, shocking. The part of the contract that's the hardest, you guys don't want to touch. Like, that's where we save all. We saw Mike Price just post in the group that he has gotten $20,000 on out of his last 3 transactions. He's gotten $20,000, $20,000, and $10K in concessions from the sellers for his buyers. Do you think people who outwardly tell you up front that they are not your legal fiduciary or financial fiduciary are going to do that? Of course not.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think if we want to talk though in that exact vein about the feasibility of this business model, I actually think so. What are the pieces that are missing, right? Mortgage side. So you could build a vertical there or a referral base there, right?
Sure.
So you have your preferred mortgage, you have your preferred insurance, maybe even title if you could direct. You could build ancillaries that direct through Landian. If you're going to work with one of our agents, they're not a fiduciary, but hey, if you use Landian Mortgage or whatever our partner is, that's how the business model could work, because they could build the verticals and they could make a lot of
You've
money.
got to have
doing
enough traffic, though.
Yeah, the marketing part is what blows this model out of the water every time. You have
Totally.
to tell people about it every second of every day.
So that's 100%, because I want to speak to all of that, right? I'm just seeing how the business model could unfold, right? You're not making a ton of money in this flat fee model. You're not making a lot of money, $49 a door at a time, because you got to pay who I would assume these are probably 1099 subcontractors who are just going to be going out and doing all of this. You're going to have a really slim margin there. So you have to build the verticals. This is not necessarily though an infeasible business model from the perspective you're talking about before, simply for the fact that people don't normally have a massive emotional attachment to unrealized losses. And what I mean by that is the buyer who goes out and just, we didn't pay shit for an agent and we did it ourselves. They're not thinking about the $20,000 they might have been able to negotiate.
Agreed.
Down, and so you're not wrong, But that entire unrealized gain that they could have had, that's not keeping them up at night.
Can we look at this from all right, let's say that we launch Landian, right? And here's what they charge. Landian charges buyers $49 for each home tour, $199 for an offer preparation session with an agent, and $99 for an AI-powered offer preparation session. Additionally, if the buyer would like a higher level of service, Landian charges $17.99 for a package that includes up to 5 home tours and 2 offer prep sessions. Added services like additional home tours, offer prep sessions, or closing consultations are still available a la carte. So let me, all right,
Bro,
as an
I'll
owner,
show you 5 houses and write 2 contracts for $1,800.
Right?
Like, are you crazy?
You're kind of proving the
That's
business
what
model.
that's what
though.
they're doing. But I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
that's not a high level of service.
So,
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
but this is the point is like, if you go back to Jesse, pull the website up, what they're saying is a Landian agent.
Yeah.
So you as Landian have to start a brokerage. And from that, you're going to have to pay those agents
true.
some type of money. So right now it's $49 a home tour. Is the agent getting $25
Yeah,
of that? Are they
you
getting-
got to have a margin there. And
Right?
It's tough.
Yeah.
And so we have seen look, I can tell you in my own team right now, I offer $50 to an agent to go pick up a sign. Do you know how many agents actually jump up and say yes?
Nope.
Very little to zero.
I
So-
started, this is not a joke. I started doing it myself again sometimes because it's so difficult to get our agents to do it for a reasonable amount of money.
So that's for $50.
It's dumb.
Like obviously if they're $49 for each home tour, Landian has to make some money.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like, again, I understand the business model concept.
Yeah.
I get it from like wanting to be offering that to consumer, but until you have technology that can go and open the door for you, that it doesn't work at a high enough level
Yeah.
that it's going to be sustainable.
Well, it's a pure velocity play, right? What I mean by that, are they VC backed or something like that? I assume they've got a capital influx somewhere.
I haven't went down.
You've got to position yourself as such a massive disruptor that you gain enough traction quickly enough that your capital doesn't run out, because you're not making money unless you take a significant market share on such a small margin business. And this is not because I know so much about this business model. This is most small business subcontractor business models. There's very small margins. You got to do a ton of volume. Essentially, you have to pay. You got to do a ton of deals, a ton of offers, a ton of showings, all the things, because you got to pay the people who are doing that. And if you can't, marketing is expensive. Exposure is expensive. If you don't capture enough market share, you're going to be pumping so much money into this thing to try and get your name out there. You're going to run out of steam really, really fast. Not saying this business model can't work, but to Nick's point, if this was always the norm, this business model would work because it would already have massive adoption, right? If this was on the level of EXP or Keller Williams, as far as people adopting this type of service, it would definitely work. Trying to build this from scratch, your burn rate is so much, it's difficult to keep pace.
And I just don't see, and again, I'm not a fan of the real estate work. Like, I'm not the real estate agent who tries to convince you that the physical work I do is difficult. I'm not going to fight that battle because it isn't, right? The physical part of my job is not hard, which that's all they're offering, by the way, right? The knowledge part of my job, the emotional and mental part of my job. I missed a team meeting the other day because I had a buyer I needed to talk to because they got an inspection report back and they were flying all the way off the side of the cliff, right? Like that's what they're not going to offer you. And that's what keeps deals together. So as we're talking about really being a proper fiduciary and really saving people money, I get that the unrealized gains thing doesn't really come into play, but it's not going to take long before people don't like your product and don't use it. And you got a business if you're not providing the proper experience for them, right?
You know what I would do in that vein? I'd be looking to partner as a leverage piece for already successful companies. Meaning, would you pay Landian for a really busy client that needed to see 30 homes that day? Would you pay Landian just to go and show them?
That's the thing. But how
do
many
it.
agents are really that busy and got that kind of expense?
They're
We're talking
not,
about two team
but
leaders.
if we're
who don't wanna
talking
do it, you know what I mean?
potential at a larger scale,
Yeah.
brokerages, things like that, that's a play that I don't know exactly how that will work. That is an interesting thought, though.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're using that and it's against the 3% model, right? So it's
Yeah, they would still be paying their agent to represent them. This would just be like on a one-off basis.
Sure. But again, if we go, let's go break it down. And I mean, Redfin is somewhat of a hybrid traditional model and a discount brokerage.
Yeah.
Right. They used to offer buyer rebate.
I think Redfin's kind of got it figured out.
Redfin, no, they haven't, because they've never made money.
They're bleeding money.
So
Okay,
they've
maybe
never
that's
made
not the
money.
aspect. I'm talking about their positioning the market as an actual resource, right? Because it feels like they have this mixture of discount and service kind of dialed in a little bit.
So what Redfin does really well is they cornered the online market. So the name, like Zillow did.
Yep.
And more people, like they have the traffic.
Yes.
Now the problem is, again, they offered discounted listings. So the listings were there, but it's still, for whatever reason, didn't gather steam.
If we compare them to Purple Bricks or whatever that SMU guy tried to start here in Dallas, those are failures, right? Redfin has found that spot in the space, though.
They have, because
better than anybody else.
They went public at the right time.
Yeah.
They've got massive capital behind them. Their biggest this is unfortunate. This is the truth. Glenn is a socialist. He's a self-admitted socialist, and the business model just doesn't make money over long term.
Yeah,
you can't charge people enough for the services that you're trying to provide to make it profitable long term, and he knows that.
And Purple Bricks came in. That's a UK based company.
Yep.
And in the UK, they weren't. You're already working with a model that they weren't. It's not like they were disrupting an industry in the UK. That's the traditional side, and
they have a totally different way of real estate than we do too.
Correct. And I've had friends that went over there and looked and tried to call an agent, and it just was a horrible experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'd have to call the listing agent. The listing agent's on vacation, and sorry, you got to wait till they come back. So the premise, like, it doesn't move very quickly. And so when Purple Bricks came here, everyone's like, oh, it's they're going to dominate here the way they did in the UK. And it just didn't work.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. And look, at the same time, it's trying to get people to work on, like, you still have to have people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're working for less, there's going to be a point where you're like, this is not worth it.
Yeah, you're going to do less and you're going to put up with less.
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I mean?
And the service is not probably going to be.
And this isn't not an industry where you can put up with less. Sometimes you got to do a lot for not much.
I think one of the fundamental problems, and this might be what Landian runs into, I have no idea if they'll succeed or fail, but Purple Bricks, I think, is a great example. When you're trying to build a disruptive company, adoption and the velocity of adoption is incredibly important, right? So this is true mostly in the social media space. How quickly does a new innovative social media platform get adoption, right? When TikTok came out,
we all remember the ads on Facebook. For the longest time, TikTok was spending so much money on Facebook getting people to download their app. I remember,
but it was getting massive.
But it did get massive
in
adoption
China,
quickly.
especially, it was getting insane adoption. Right? That's because of the ease of use. I log into social media every day from my phone, so my adaptation can be very quick, and I can start monetizing it very quickly. People are only doing a residential real estate transaction once every few years, and so when people have an ideology of how the market should work, you're not going to be able to capture market share overnight because people aren't moving every day, and so your marketing and the capital behind your exposure, what you're trying to do to get your name out there to be a disruptor, you've got to capture a significant amount of the available market share at the time, because the available market share at the time is just a very small fraction of the available market share over time. But you got to survive that long by getting people in the door right away. And when you're doing something that's disruptive in a market that people only transact in every once in a while, it's really hard to get traction with a really innovative model while also spending a fortune marketing that model and getting attention and exposure. It's a very delicate balance.
Let me ask you this, Jesse, if you can pull up real trends, let's look up the top brokerages. Can you name one flat fee style brokerage to the consumer that is a top brokerage in the United States? And why do you think that is? I can't think of one in certain areas, and we've been in different markets that dominates in a certain city, sub-market out there.
I'm sure there is one somewhere in some smaller market, but I imagine most of our larger markets, it's probably going to be the typical 6 or 7.
So this is going to be by teams. How do we look up brokerages?
You can literally just scroll down and look at the logos on that scroll.
Yeah,
you can.
On that
scroll
slide.
down the page. You keep going a little bit further.
Like this is them.
Yeah. So they're all So
You're talking about Coldwell Banker, EXP,
United's
Redfin's
on there, right?
Era.
So if we look at all these, like none of these to the front facing consumer is, is a flat fee style brokerage, right? There's all of them have probably some type of commissionary, some type of commission in there.
Yep.
Or what we would call for full service.
Yeah.
So is that because, why is that? Is that, would the consumer say that's because the, NAR has such a deep rooted hold on everybody?
I think that's what haters would say. I think there's a mixture of maybe some of the built-in idea of this is how real estate is done. I can admit that. It's also, like Brian just said, it's not something people do very often.
Yep.
And the process doesn't change dramatically every 5 years. It changes enough to where if you only did something, if I did something once 5 years ago, I'm not going to remember I did it, much less how to do it in some cases. And I think that's what really keeps this thing moving, is because there's no real way, I think, to do what's required as a real estate agent from a fiduciary standpoint and with your client's best interests, which I feel like everybody at this table takes to heart, and do that for $50 a showing and $199 every time you need to write a contract, right? Like, I just don't think you're going to at the end of the day, I don't think the consumer is going to be super happy with that experience across the board. That's why the Keller Williams and EXPs, when we look at the huge teams, they're all the ones that we recognize. It's Place and Livian and Mark Spain. And if you're in the real estate space, you know who those teams are. They're the best at what they do, right? 100%. And they don't do it for 0.5%. It's just the money doesn't work that way.
There's a whole other conversation around, that Landian model and consumer satisfaction after the transaction, and how those things circle back around, and potential opening yourself for litigation on transactions that go bad after the deal closes and things like that. There's a whole different conversation there that your fiduciary is supposed to be, solve that problem. But that's why your fiduciary exists, right? What's our next? I feel like we've done a decent job on this one. What's our next Homebuyer trends for fall 2024?
Or do you want to take
Kamala's
tax?
I like the tax conversation.
I like the third one better.
Dude.
Yeah, let's go with Kamala's tax plan and housing plan.
So,
break this down, Brian.
There is no breakdown. That's what I love about it. This is what I love.
By the way, is this her plan?
Yes.
It came out of her mouth on television. So
she announced both of these last week.
Yeah. This is what I love about, I'm very honest and open about where I stand politically, which, me is neither one side or the other to an extreme amount, but I'm very vocal about what I feel and believe in types of policy issues. There's no breakdown. It's a very vague idea that we're going to give first-time home buyers a $25,000 tax credit, which is an interesting concept. Whether or not that has a massive effect on the market is yet to be seen. Whether or not that the effect that it could have is positive or negative is also yet to be seen. There are some stipulations around this, if I remember correctly, Jesse, like this is only going to apply to a certain threshold of first-time home buyer that makes them less than 140% of the median national income. Is that right? I saw that right.
I think there's something like that. Yeah.
So first generation home buyers who earn less than 140% of the area median income is a part of this proposal. I'll open it up to you guys. I got my thoughts. What do we think, boys? Free $25,000 to anybody who's a first generation home buyer.
Here's how I feel about it. I think the 25 grand is probably out there for a lot of lower income buyers already in their county and city. We already have some of these programs in place, right? It's not a national thing. I understand it's a sexy deal for election time. My bigger question is how do you well, one of the stupid things I've seen is everybody arguing about the fact that sellers will just raise their price by 25 grand. The sellers don't know who's getting this tax break and who doesn't, like it, and they wouldn't appraise, and all of that part I think is relatively silly. But I will be honest with you, I don't have a problem with this. As a real estate agent, it is super, super hard out there. I do think first-time home buyers they will have a harder time getting a home in the coming years than any first-time home buyer group has ever had in the history of the United States. And so doing something for that group, even though we talked last week, it is kind of kicking a can down the road type of thing, putting real cash in people's pockets in the form of a down payment for them to get into a home, which we all know most people can afford the monthly payment of a home. They can't afford the money to get into it, right? A lot of people are already paying $2,500 a month in rent, $2,200 a month in rent. The down payment assistance is the part of it that would get a lot of people over the hump. I don't know how that trickles down and affects other stuff.
I think it goes, I look at it from this angle is if you could open up qualifications for down payment assistance programs, we would see whether that helps or not. And right now, I believe that what we should create, in my opinion, if this were me coming out with a plan on this, I'd create a special first-time home buyer interest rate program that only specifies, you have to be a true first-time home buyer, meaning you haven't owned a home in the last 5 to 7 years, and probably maybe longer than that, 7+ years. Yeah. That goes back to a first-time home buyer, and you get a super low interest rate that's financed, that's owned by the government. And you can't sell it for a certain amount of time unless there's true financial hardships, death, divorce, true loss of job, something like that. And if you sell it within a certain time frame, if you did sell it and there was a profit to be made, then a portion of that gets paid back into that program. And so to me, it's not always about the down payment. It's about the interest rate or how to make up that special payment program. So
yeah, actually, your idea is better. I would love to explore that a little bit more. If the government is going to intervene in what is purely a private market, meaning private home ownership, I would love to see them do it in a way where borrowing costs are cheaper rather than pumping more money into the system. Make no mistake. Again, I'm not going to draw my line in the sand on the long-term effects of this. What I do know as a general principle is when you give people free government money to purchase an asset over the long term, that price of that asset tends to rise. There's a reason that inflation is where it is right now. It's a combination of money printing and government spending. It's just the truth.
And this is a legitimate question. When you're talking about interest rates, isn't there some situation where the bank has to take that interest rate and borrow the money at a certain rate and then sell it as a certain rate? So are you also giving the bank a break on those specific loans?
Yeah, and that would be, so that's a really great point, right? I'm kind of, masterminding this in my head as I'm even talking about it. So I would rather there be some sort of incentive to minimize the spread than to hand people, and we call it a tax credit. Most people making this amount of money don't pay $25,000 a year in taxes.
That's the other thing.
So there's already been comments that it will show up as basically a cash payment on the closing statement. Is not necessarily. Tax credit is this thing that we talk about in regards to our tax filing our tax report at the end of the year, rather than it's going to lower your tax basis because your tax basis probably wasn't that high in the first place.
2008 we had a $7,500 home first time home buyer tax credit, and it was repayable over 15 years,
right?
And I don't, I'm trying to go back to that time frame in my mind. It didn't necessarily spur buying interest.
It did not.
No, 2009 they upped it to $8,000 that it was not. It did not have to be repaid. Didn't necessarily spur it. It did help. I know people that was like, oh, this is great, but it was off. Like, you don't realize it until you get your taxes back, right? And so to me, the way that I would see is, like, again, the $25,000 tax credit, I think it's just formalities and it sounds great, but if you gave better interest where theoretically, the government is buying how many government-backed securities? The government through Fannie Mae is buying most of those loans.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, so they're already spending a ton of money on that. Yeah. So a lot of that money could be set aside to then go and say, this is the lending pool, just like how you have down payment assistance program. In certain instances, once that money's out for that year, they have to reallocate the budget. Yep. And so you could set aside and say, all right, banks can pull from this if they're truly a first-time home buyer, and they have to go through the qualification processes and like the underwriters do, and they get the loan, and it comes from that, again, that government entity. The payments get made back to really the government holder. So they're making a little bit of money off of the lower interest rate. But again, if they sell early, there's going to be a percentage that will sell early. And if there's a profit to be made, then that portion needs to go back into the funds.
That's wow. I mean, so if you boil it down, I got another thought that I want to cover, but if you boil it down to the idea of the American dream and homeownership, it was never designed for us to move every 5 years. It was for you to be able to afford a house. What if you took the same amount of resources you're talking about right now, and rather than the American government being the largest holder, I believe, of mortgage-backed securities, which is bananas in the first place, and giving people a $25,000 credit for first-time home buyers, what if you created an entire pool of funds just like that with taxpayer money? Instead of sending it to bureaucracy, you gave a first-time home buyer loan at 1% interest.
Yes.
Right. And it was government funded. And I'm sure we have the resources to do it. We're certainly still funding the Ukraine war. But you only got
to
it
protect the other stuff in Ukraine.
You only got it once, and when you sold it, went away. And so it really didn't affect the private markets. If you're selling your third, fourth, or fifth home, and that would not only promote home ownership, would promote long-term generational home ownership.
And that's the thing too, the long-term generational home ownership part, as we sit here and talk about how much that has slipped, and we become such a renter society. To do something to move the American dream of home ownership back into the hands of homeowners would be freaking amazing.
That would be cool if someone would listen to us on that. And
it's not like we haven't been right for 6 years.
I just don't see how this is a positive. I truly, boys, I don't think. I think at the very worst, it does become inflationary because a third of the market is first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
I think at the very least, it has no effect whatsoever. And I also think it is the wrong solution to the problem. If the solution to this is the big difference between this and 2008. Market sentiment was the problem in 2008. Nobody wanted to buy a house because housing had lost like 40% of its value nationwide. First-time home buyers were like, we don't want any part of that. They had to give them a tax credit just to spur any sort of activity whatsoever. Rates weren't high at that point.
Correct.
They had brought them down, right? So that's a bit of a different situation in that people were scared to buy homes. People want to buy homes now. They just can't afford them. The problem is affordability. Affordability is the fundamental problem in the United States. I talked about this last time. The rate at which you're borrowing, the price at which you're paying, and how much money you make at your job. Giving people $25,000 free dollars will not solve the problem of affordability. Fundamentally, it will not.
And I'll go back to when interest rates were low. How many people did we talk to, Matt, Brian, and Jesse, as we're lead genning that wanted to buy a house, and rates were 3.5%, 4%, but didn't have a down payment.
Mm-hmm. They didn't have an extra $100,000 to bring to the table too, because the market was projected.
So even there in that time, correct. But let's say it was a normal market.
Sure.
And it was still 4%. They didn't have the down payment money. So it's not to me, it's down payment. While we look at down payment as the issue, it's really that they didn't save for it, because we go look at where they directing their funds to, and they're going and still getting their nails done. They're buying $5 Starbucks, 5 times a week. That's $25.
Yep.
What is that? $100 a month, $1,200 a year. That they're not, So when we look at it fundamentally, like a lot of that opportunity comes into, those people, the
right.
Financial resources are there. They just don't want most people don't want to cut back.
We have an affordability crisis in America while people are spending on luxuries and conveniences more than ever, which is insane to me. Don't tell me you're broke and still buy smokes.
You're not.
Don't tell me you're broke and still hit Grubhub, because you're not broke enough.
Look, I was the biggest advocate on last show around how much more money we spend as opposed to back in the 50s, to make things convenient. So I'm going to do my fair share of victim blaming here as well. We do spend too much money on convenience. Also, understand that everything, when you're talking about financing for single family home ownership, is percentage based. What is an FHA down payment?
3.5%.
3.5%. 3.5% of what? The sales price. 3.5% is not that much. So if people can't get an FHA loan and they need a $25,000 credit, then the 3.5% is of a sales price that is fundamentally too high.
Yeah.
It's not in line with what people make. So this doesn't solve that problem. You can throw as many Band-Aids as you want at it, but the entire reason the FHA program exists is because it's a more affordable way to put a down payment on a house that a traditional mortgage wasn't going to give you.
And if that's not working because 3.5% is too much because sales prices are too high, there's no way you can solve that problem with government money. You have to either wait for wages to come up or wait for prices to come down.
Do you know what we did? It's harder to find areas that qualify, but back in 8, 9, 10, 11, even after that, up until the growth in this area, we would promote USDA loans.
Yeah.
And USDA loans are 100% financing.
Free money.
Right. And it's 100% financing and or zero down payment, right? 100% financing. And it was in the outskirts, the rural areas. And they wanted
They're
to
not that rural anymore.
No,
Yeah.
like Riley, Texas used to all be, 100% USDA.
I checked on
Prosper
one of my
was at one point.
I checked on my listing, all of my listings the other day, and I was like, 2 of them are USDA loan eligible, and I'm like, I wouldn't have thought that, right?
I literally just sold it. I just got the email that funded in Hutchins, Texas, and I'm like, this will definitely qualify. Nope.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so when we look at it, the USDA has special programs out there for 100% financing to promote growth in rural areas, but we can't have special financing and down payment programs and this stuff for first-time home buyers. That to me is nonsense. And so it's not the tax credit, because the tax credit doesn't do anything. It's the interest rates are still going to be higher, because if you're getting a $25,000 tax credit, you're still getting a 6.5 to 7% interest rate.
Yeah. After talking to you guys over this, I've completely changed my mind.
I appreciate it. That's why I love the show. But why are the programs that we've already put in place not working? If the answer is to throw more government money, like I said, I'm very transparent about where I stand on politics. This is the more conservative.
Do you know how
financier
hard it
in me.
is to qualify for like NACA or any type of down payment assistance program? You have to fit in this small box.
It's so hard.
And
Seriously.
I meant more like FHA.
Well,
Like the Federal Housing Authority's program specifically designed to make down payments more affordable for first-time homebuyers.
yeah, and it's done, like, for a long time. It's done a good job. We didn't see it during COVID market, right? Because more people were during that market. We were seeing people that was a different market for different home buyer. But
Yes.
it's
Go ahead.
FHA has come back. We are seeing more FHA loans happening.
I agree.
But again, I want to go back to speaking to the first-time home buyer, the one that doesn't want to live in mom and dad's house. They don't want to live in an apartment. And, and we promote these down payment assistance programs, but then they're like, oh, you make too much.
Yep.
Well, the ones that qualify that don't make enough can't afford in this price range anyway.
Yes.
And it's going to put you in unsafe areas
Yes.
that no one would put themselves or their loved one into.
Yep.
And to me, that program has to change, and no one is addressing that part.
This is a great way to look at it, and this parlays your thought a little bit, right? You guys can disagree with me. This will be the line that I draw in the sand here. If you cannot afford 3.5% down payment, you cannot afford a home. That's not your fault. Homes cost too much. It just is what it is. If I cannot afford a 3.5% down payment, something's fundamentally wrong with the market. Homes cost more than wages are allowing me to pay.
Maybe.
Plain and simple.
Let me ask you this, though.
Okay.
All right. You got down payment assistance programs.
Okay.
Right. You're down on luck, but you can, you make enough money to pay your $2,000, $1,800 to $2,000 rent.
Right.
Right. But you're never going to get ahead because you're still paying that rent.
Right.
You have to get an increase to increase your disposable income, but life happens. Things come up.
Right.
Right. But at the same time, what happens when rent goes up?
Right.
You find a way to scrimp and save and stuff like that. They're not going to afford the 3.5% down payment. That's why we have to either create some type of special financing program. It's not the tax credit.
Right.
It's a true, all right, if we're going to give, let's combine it. Let's marry the two. Not a tax credit. We're using down payment assistance program with a lower interest rate for first-time home buyers. Put it on a 40-year note.
Okay.
Sure. So we push it out. Interest, look, we're pushing the interest rate out longer. You know what some people say is like now you're putting people into, paying out, being stuck in a house over long term because they're paying more interest.
Yeah.
Most people want to own a home.
Yes.
They don't want to live in an apartment that they don't own. They don't have control over.
Right.
And in my opinion, it wasn't designed to live in for 5 to 7 years anyway. That started happening later on as prices went up and we started talking about the wealth building. And we're all, we can point fingers at ourselves for talking about it because it is a great wealth builder.
Right.
But that's not the number one reason. It's to put roots down. back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, most people we know, their parents or grandparents lived in the same house they bought back in the day.
Well, and the thing that we need to acknowledge that while it is a wealth builder, it's not an emergency fund. Your house is not an emergency fund because you need to have a place to live. So you can't just sell it out from under yourself because you have to it's not some reserve bank account. And I think that's sometimes how real estate agents have presented it. And it's not that. And the longer you do stay in a home, the better position you do put yourself in to use it as a wealth builder and potentially parlay it into other stuff.
Yes. All right. Can I finish my thought?
No.
This is I agree with you.
And the show,
that's the point that I'm trying to make, right? You hit the nail on the head. So I'll start again and then just no.
Starting over.
Just if you can't afford 3.5%, you can't afford the house. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Houses cost too much if I can't afford 3.5% down payment. That is fundamental, I think, personal finance 101. But then going back to what causes affordability, the price, the rate at which you purchase, right? And the wage that I make in my job.
Yep.
Nowhere in there is affordability linked to my ability to make a down payment, because after I make a down payment, I still have to pay every month for the home that I'm living in. And if I can't come up with 3%, I'm probably not on stable footing enough to pay 6.5% or 6% or 5.5% or whatever it is at this asset price. So either prices need to come down, which will take time. Unfortunately, there are some quagmires the government gets us in that they can't get us out of that just take time. Wages have to increase or prices need to come down. There is a thesis that I don't entirely agree with, but I think is on stable footing, that the inventory influx from the baby boomers could bring prices down at some point.
I've heard this conversation a little bit lately.
I do think that wages have to increase. I think that's the faster way to create affordability. Regardless, nowhere in the picture does the government essentially printing money make housing more affordable. At best, it's neutral, and it gets people into a home they probably can't afford on their own. And at worst, it's inflationary. If you're going to provide a solution that speaks to one of those three levers, and lending and the rate at which you're borrowing is a lever you could pull as the government.
Sure.
You could create a special lending program.
If wages go up, cost of everything goes up. Instead, we're still in an inflationary part.
It's also, that's a tough lever to pull. When wages go up, that can still be inflationary. Prices do need to come down, or the cost of borrowing needs to come down. That's where the government could step in. A $25,000 tax credit does not make houses more affordable. At worst, it puts people in a predatory position where they're buying a home they can't afford.
Does the cost of borrowing at those gluttonous price points where there's tons of buyers who need to be between $250 and $350 drive up the price of the homes that you're trying to drive down?
So when we talk about it being inflationary, we do have to understand that people that are buying in a certain demographic of buyers, like first-time home buyers, are mostly buying in the same price point. That's the argument, is that they're not spread out across all price points.
No.
If you're giving everybody who's looking between $250 and $350 $25,000 free dollars,
you've just made those homes more expensive.
Yes, they will go up.
Yeah,
dude.
Absolutely.
That is. Yeah. I'm not banking, I'm not drawing that line in the sand, but doesn't that make perfect sense?
It makes very logical sense when you start walking
But
out.
prices aren't going to fall.
No.
Here's the thing. Prices aren't going to fall fast enough. Wages aren't going to grow fast enough. So you're going to have to create, again, for first-time home buyers. Look, you've moved your way up, and then you put restrictions on it. You can't rent it out. We find out, and then, look, that's mortgage fraud. So you start putting restrictions on this. The other thing is now look, we can go in the whole show over this and make this really, really political. Then we're going to have to get into, property insurance, because, when we talk about not just affording a house, this is going to affect renters, impact renters as well in a negative way.
Rents will go
Property
up.
Insurance is going up through the roof. And we're starting to see where insurance companies are not wanting to insure or insure the amount, the lesser amount for roofs.
And it's more expensive to insure an investment property than your personal residence, correct or no?
Yes.
It's supposed to be. That's supposed to be how the market works.
Yeah.
If you're Nick, you can insure an Airbnb for cheaper than your primary residence.
I was going to bring that up.
That's ridiculous.
So my primary residence is $9,000. If I turn it into an Airbnb, it was like, what did I send you? 66.
It's like $6,500. But
Yes.
you're
You guys
right.
should just
That's
rent
how
it from yourself every
that's
day.
how the market should work, but it doesn't sometimes.
That's
It makes
wild.
no
So
sense.
the problem, again, we want to drive homeownership for the younger generation, right? And as you start, in your mid 20s to early 30s, And then as you start working your career up and making more money and start having a family, then you can move up into houses. Or again, you might have a job change, you might have a loss, you might have a death, there might be divorce. There's going to be something that may happen that it unfortunately forces you into a sell position. And then a part of those proceeds need to go into, back into the government pool. And so I never thought I would be kind of for more government, but in this instance where the dream of home ownership is I mean, that's an American dream right there.
I think it's the same amount of government because the
Yeah, I don't know,
25,000
there's more
requires government too.
Yeah.
So
it's just government doing better things.
And it's more suckling at the teat of government. The 25,000 is than this scenario.
That's
that you
assuming
guys
that it
proposed.
gets passed, though. The problem is, right?
Yeah.
Everything sound like they're throwing everything out. Like
when
again,
your entire
well, it's
campaign
election
runs
time.
on vibes and joy. It's tough to get anything done.
Do you remember?
afterwards.
Do you remember?
Good
In,
joy.
do you remember in school when you were going to run for student council president? You're like, I'm going to have free pizza Fridays.
That's exactly what I
Free
was gonna
pizza
say.
Fridays.
Is that what every kid did?
Yes.
I was literally thinking
Yes.
free pizza.
And so you're just running on that. Not you look as president. You don't care where the money's coming from. Who's got to pay for it? It's free pizza,
That's right.
right? Someone has to pay for this.
Yeah.
And so essentially, we still as taxpayers are paying for the mortgage-backed securities that's being
Yeah.
bought from Fannie Mae.
Well,
Right. And so we can set aside or maybe take some of that war budget and everything else and create a program so that we have first-time home buyers now starting to get into home ownership. And then I do support, which is going to sound freaking crazy, I don't believe that corporations should own 50,000 houses.
this isn't going to sound crazy. No, we get twisted about this because you and I, and really all of us, consider ourselves capitalists by nature. But that doesn't mean that we have to abandon all of our principles of morality and how very complex and nuanced markets at this scale interact with their societies. Like it is detrimental to the individual's ability to build wealth in America when corporations own a significant portion of the primary wealth building vehicle. That's not anti-capitalist to think.
Yeah. So,
Evil shit
pro-America.
happens even in a free society.
Yeah.
So I don't feel bad about thinking that's crazy. I agree with you.
I think we should somehow get can we just get on to the is it the Federal Housing Authority that can make these rules? Because who was elected? Who runs the FHA right now?
It's a good question. I have no idea.
Not
Jeff
a clue.
Jefferson.
Isn't that appointed by the president?
That is appointed. I think is that
the-
appointed? Do the FHA leader, FHA president? I think it's president.
FHA leader.
Yeah, I don't know. Who's the lead guy?
Head appointments guy.
Chief. FHA chief. Golding. This guy named
Yeah.
Golding.
Golding.
Okay.
Presently, the FHA is under the leadership of Assistant Secretary for Housing and Federal Housing Commissioner Julia Gordon.
Okay.
Right.
All right. I wonder how much money she makes. Your name's Glenn Gulia?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. She was appointed in confirmed as new FHA commissioner May 11, 20. So in June 2021, President Biden nominated Julia Gordon to head the FHA, but it didn't go through until 2022.
Have
So,
you ever read Too Big to Fail? Andrew
No.
Ross Sorkin?
I have it, but I didn't read it.
Please read it.
Okay.
Only just to.
Will you
to-
read it to me?
I'll read it to you. In this voice.
Yeah.
Only for the sheer fact of just a great pulling back of the curtain of how decentralized the power is and how little power everybody has in the
Yeah.
game. They're just in their own 3-foot circle trying to do what they can to do what's best for kind of their career and the country. But those things don't always jive.
Well, it makes sense because I'm just trying to
do.
look. I'm just trying to put the
Yeah.
show in the best light.
100%. A good way to put it is when you ask who makes the decisions, it's really no one.
If
It's
we
no
were
one-
FHA
no one's
commissioner,
in charge of everything.
if we were the commissioner of the FHA, we would go live every single day on the only real estate podcast we're
That's
listening
it.
to, and just talk about everything we're going to do.
That's all I do.
And then we'll go back and listen back and see how
How
much
right
we
we
actually
were.
accomplished.
I want to
That's amazing.
just a 24-hour live stream of Jerome Powell looking at a Bloomberg machine, just shaking his head, like,
Sweating.
what are we going to do today? This is bad.
Do you think that will get uncensored now? Because, Zuckerberg said he's no longer playing the game.
No.
I thought he was going he's going, he totally turned on
dude, he definitely turned.
on
Surfboards and beers
talking
on
about
4th of July.
yeah. Well, one, he glowed up in a big way.
He did.
He's like a black belt, and I think he's wearing sexy contacts. I don't think those are his real eyes. But yeah, he said that they pressured him and all that stuff.
And they caved.
Yeah. What was that that full quote of basically like, he was basically talking about election fraud.
Without
And-
saying election fraud,
but that's basically what he was saying. Says he regrets caving to the White House on censoring stuff. Look at that fucking hair.
Jeez.
So silly.
It's so funny. Okay, so what's the quote? I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards due to pressure from any administration in either direction. And we're ready to push back if something like this happens
look,
again.
that's why he's been training.
I know he's going to have to fight somebody.
Yeah, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master.
Yeah. Wow.
He looked like Favreau from Friends walking into the fucking ring. Though.
UFC.
Yeah. I saw him walking in. I was like, that looks exactly like, where's Monica and Ross?
Right. That's so funny. Yeah. That was interesting.
Yeah, good show.
Boys, new format gives us more to talk about than we can handle. I love this.
I do
know.
too.
I enjoy this.
I know, it's really awesome.
Look, if you liked it, hopefully you do, especially if you're listening to the replay, because the live listeners weren't really jumping onto it today, but we'll get that going,
we'll get
especially
back
with
to it.
more consistency going on. So
Yep.
if you can, go leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and then go to our YouTube channel. Just search it's only RE.
Only RE Pod.
Only RE Pod on YouTube. And then our Facebook group is the only real estate group worth being a part of. And then you heard the sponsors at the beginning of the show. I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. Just vote for Kamala for 4th grade president. That's pretty much
Free
in line with
pizzas.
her-
Free pizza.
I heard free pizzas and actually $25,000 in a free pizza.
Pretty much in line with her
Yes.
resume.
Yeah. Real estate agents, stop asking listing agents what the commission being paid is. It's a stupid question.
Hey, thank you for watching. We truly appreciate it. Checking out another episode of the Only Real Estate Podcast worth listening to. If you're watching this on YouTube, please go ahead, hit that share button, hit that like button, and hit the subscribe button. Right? We're dropping more stuff on YouTube constantly. If you're on iTunes, leave us a review, please. We're really, really focused on building up those reviews so we can get more searchable content on there. And if you're on Facebook, like everyone else is, go over and search the only real estate group worth being a part of. You're going to want to go join that group. I'm telling you right now, there's so much gold in there. So go join, share us on YouTube, and leave us that iTunes review, please. Go do it right now. We'll see you on the next show.